The child was being dragged toward a black SUV. Elena Carter could have walked away. In this neighborhood, everyone knew the rule: never get involved. Never interfere with what moves in the dark. But instead of turning her back, she charged at 3 armed men with nothing but a rock in her hand and her voice. What she didn't know was that she had just saved the only son of one of Chicago's most powerful men. And from that moment, he decided she belonged to his world. Elena Carter, 41 years old, had just finished an 11-hour shift at Discount Fresh, where she stood behind a register all day. She stuffed her wages, still smelling faintly of metal, into the pocket of her worn coat and took a shortcut through Lincoln Park. The night was cold, the wind slicing through rows of bare trees, making her shiver. Once she crossed the small bridge over the shallow creek, she would reach the apartment complex where her 14-year-old brother Liam waited with canned pasta for dinner. As she walked, she mentally calculated whether her pay would be enough to fix the damn heater. Then she heard it, a sound thin as glass and full of fear. A child crying, fragile, broken, close. She froze for a few seconds. Her heart and her reason fought fiercely. In Chicago, especially after 8 at night, crying wasn't something you walked toward. But that sound, it was a boy's cry, no older than 10. A hiss cut through the wind, followed by the heavy scrape of something being dragged. Elena crouched low behind the hedge, her breath tight. Through the branches, she saw a scene that made her blood run cold. A black SUV parked by the basketball court, headlights off. 3 men in black surrounding a small boy who struggled wildly. His brown hair was matted, his clothes filthy, one arm clamped in the grip of a man built like a pillar. "We've got the package." Moving to the second point. "The boss wants it clean and quiet," one of them said into his phone. "Let me go. My dad will find you," the boy shouted, his voice trembling but defiant. "Oh, trust me, kid," the man sneered, tightening his hold. "Your old man should have learned to protect you better." Elena stepped back, reaching into her pocket for her phone. Dead battery. She should run, find the police, call someone. But if she ran, that car would vanish into the dark, and she knew too well what happened to children who disappeared. Taking a deep breath, she looked around, grabbed the largest rock she could find, and hurled it, not at the men, but at a nearby sedan. The glass shattered. The alarm screamed, lights flashing wildly, a sharp crack through the deadly silence. "What the hell?" One of the men spun around. Elena didn't wait. She burst from the bushes like a shot. "Fire! There's a fire! Call 911. "Fire in the park," she shouted, her voice echoing across the emptiness. People always reacted faster to the word fire. She'd learned that from a safety drill years ago. In that brief chaos, she slammed into the man holding the boy, her shoulder driving into his chest. "Run!" she yelled at the child. He didn't hesitate, bolting toward the park gate like a small arrow. Elena turned, but the man's fist caught her. He yanked her hair and slammed her head into the car. Pain exploded through her skull. She staggered. Another punch. She hit the cold ground, blood filling her mouth, ears ringing, shouts, alarms. Then an engine roared, tires screeched, and the world went silent except for the siren still wailing and her ragged breathing. Elena lay flat, staring up at the bare branches slicing the frozen sky. Her face burned. She laughed, then groaned from the pain. But the boy was gone, safe. Worth it. Even if she had no idea what she just walked into, it wasn't a random kidnapping. The men moved too precisely. And the boy, he'd said, my father, with a certainty that could shake the world. Elena couldn't know that within hours, that father, Dominic Valente, would learn exactly who had saved his son. And when he did, nothing in Elena's life would ever be the same again. If you're listening to this and feel your breath catch at Elena's story, how an ordinary woman dared to do what everyone else turned away from, subscribe to our channel. Don't miss the tales where courage and fate collide in the dark. Every day we share the journeys of small people with fearless hearts. And I want to know, where are you hearing this story from? Leave a comment below. Tell me your city, your country, or the quiet corner where you sit, so we'll see how far Elena Carter's story has reached, and who out there still believes that even in the darkest night, someone will choose to stand up. Elena woke to a dull hammering pain at the back of her head and the morning light leaking through faded curtains. One eye was swollen shut, her lips cracked, her throat raw as if she'd screamed all night. When she tried to sit up, every joint protested, especially her back, where she'd been slammed against the car. The old clock on the wall ticked mockingly. Nearly 7 a.m. Liam was still asleep, curled up on the sofa under a thin blanket, earbuds loose in his ears. Elena dragged herself to the kitchen for a glass of water, but the first sound that froze her wasn't the faucet. It was an engine outside, steady and heavy. She moved to the window, pulled the curtain aside. 3 black SUVs lined the narrow alley in front of the old building. Their windows were pitch dark, but she didn't need to see inside to know they weren't here for groceries. She stepped back, heart pounding. The door was locked. No knock. No bell. Only silence, tense and waiting. Then, just like in her worst fear, the door flew open. Not opened, kicked in. Hinges snapped. The door slammed against the wall. Elena stumbled back toward the kitchen, reaching for a knife, anything to defend herself. Liam jolted awake, dazed by the noise. 7 men entered. No hats, no words. All in black suits, white shirts, ties perfectly straight, guns visible beneath their jackets. They moved without hesitation, as if breaking into homes was second nature. The last man who stepped in froze the air. Tall, near 50, dark hair streaked with grey, eyes sharp as blades. He carried no noise, yet his presence made everyone step aside. Elena stood in front of Liam, a small fruit knife slick in her sweating hand. The man's grey-blue eyes took in every bruise on her face, the split lips, the way she stood firm despite the tremor in her body. He didn't draw his gun. His voice was low, calm, terrifying in its control. "You're Elena Carter?" She nodded. "Last night," he continued, "you stopped 3 men in Lincoln Park." She said nothing, gripping the knife tighter. "That boy," he said slowly, "was my son. His name is Mateo." Elena swallowed hard, her heartbeat drumming in her skull. He took a step closer. Liam shrank behind her. "You don't know who I am, do you?" She shook her head. "Dominic Valente." The name hit her like a strike. Even someone far from that world had heard it, a name never printed but always whispered. A shadow behind logistics firms, data networks, underground banks. The man police avoided, rivals feared, the city murmured about. He stepped closer. "I'm not here to harm you," he said. "On the contrary, you saved the most precious thing in my life, and I don't let something like that pass unnoticed." Elena's breath trembled. "I didn't do anything. I just saw a boy who needed help." "Exactly," Dominic nodded, while everyone else turned away. "You had no weapon, no reason, no one behind you. But you still did it. That's something I don't forget." One of his men handed her a phone. "We want you to come with us," Dominic said. "Just to talk. No one will be hurt. You have my word." "And if I refuse?" she rasped. "Then you'll still be safe," he said softly. "But no one will protect your brother from the people who took Mateo." Elena turned to Liam. His eyes were wide with fear. She understood. Every door behind her had closed. Only one path lay ahead, dark, uncertain, but unavoidable. She took a breath, set the knife down. "Give me 5 minutes to change," she said. Dominic nodded. In his eyes, the flicker that passed wasn't victory. It was respect. She had stepped into his world last night. Now she was about to walk all the way in. The morning was still veiled in mist when the second SUV stopped before an iron gate wrought with swirling patterns, its black sheen as sharp and closed as a blade. Elena stared through the car window, her hand gripping the strap of her worn leather bag. Liam sat beside her, silent since the ride began, his young face drawn tight in the kind of silence that comes from being somewhere far too clean, far too quiet, far too alien. The gate opened slowly, soundlessly, gliding apart as if welcoming them into another world. Inside stretched a cobblestone path winding through a perfectly trimmed garden, ivory statues standing motionless among the lush green grass. And in the distance, a house. No, a mansion. 3 stories high, its facade dressed in pale stone, tall columns reaching the roof, windows gleaming as they caught the dim morning light. Elena felt as though she were walking into a cold dream, one too flawless to be real. The car halted at the marble steps. A woman in her 50s appeared in the doorway, her silver hair pinned neatly back, her grey suit unwrinkled, her shoes gleaming. She looked at Elena as if assessing a package delivered to the wrong address. "Good morning, Miss Carter." "I'm Mrs. Porter, the head housekeeper," she said evenly, her tone not cold yet devoid of any warmth. "Please come inside. Mr. Valente is expecting you." The interior of the mansion was unlike any place Elena had ever seen. Every tile shone bright enough to mirror her reflection. The paintings were not prints, but real oil canvases, each signed faintly in the corner. A crystal chandelier spilled light from the high ceiling, scattering reflections across the deep green velvet wallpaper that covered the walls. Liam stayed close, his eyes darting around, perhaps sensing, as she did, that they didn't belong here. When they reached the living room, Dominic Valente was already waiting. He had removed his jacket, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled to his forearms. Yet he still carried the command of a man used to ruling a room with nothing but a glance. Matteo sat beside him on the sofa, his brown hair still tousled but his face clearer now. The moment he saw Elena, he jumped up, ran straight to her, and threw his arms around her. "I missed you." Elena froze for a heartbeat, then gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. Matteo nodded eagerly. "You scared them," he said. "Dad said so." Dominic's voice cut through the moment. "I want you and your brother to stay here for a while, temporarily, until things are settled. We don't know if the men who attacked might come back." Elena opened her mouth to object, but he raised a hand to stop her. "I know you don't like depending on anyone," he said, "but this isn't about pride. It's about safety, and I won't allow you to leave until I'm certain you both are secure." Elena bit her lip, her hand brushing lightly against Liam's back, as if seeking his agreement. He said nothing, but his eyes didn't protest. Mrs. Porter led them upstairs to the east wing. 2 bedrooms, private bath, garden view. "Breakfast is at 7, sharp, never late. Attire must be proper in common areas." Elena listened as if memorizing a list of rules. The housekeeper pointed down the hall. "Master Liam's room is there. Yours is next to it. Master Matteo's is at the end of the corridor, guarded. If you need anything, use the intercom. Personal phones are not permitted." Elena stepped into her room and froze. A large bed covered in spotless white sheets, walnut furniture polished to a glow, Italian glass lamps, wooden floors without a speck of dust. The window opened onto a garden with a fountain where sparrows fluttered around the tall pines. For a fleeting moment, she wanted to take off her shoes, sink into that bed, and forget everything. But then, the feeling of displacement rose inside her like a cold tide. This wasn't home. It wasn't even a hotel. Everything here was arranged with the precision of a military compound disguised in silk and velvet. Elena set her bag down and stood still in the opulent silence, listening to the steady tick of the clock, each second falling like a pin in a cathedral. She had no idea where she stood in her life anymore. But one thing was certain, it would never be the same as yesterday. Elena didn't remember when she had fallen asleep, only that when she opened her eyes, the faint light of morning was slipping through the thick cream-colored curtains. Everything was unnervingly quiet. No car horns. No neighbors' children crying. No washing machine rumbling from the apartment below. Only the distant sound of birds and a stillness so clean, so absolute that she wondered if she were dreaming in a place that didn't belong to her. She sat up, still dizzy, and padded barefoot to the window, looking down at the garden where the fountain sent silver streams into the pale sunlight. A gardener, Mr. Ellis, she would later learn, was trimming the hedges in silence, as if the world here ran on Swiss precision, untouched by chaos. Turning back toward the room, Elena was about to find Liam when a soft knock came at the door. She opened it to find Matteo standing there, clutching a thick leather-bound book, his wide brown eyes clouded like a stormed-over sky. "Am I bothering you?" he asked so quietly that Elena had to bend down to hear him. She smiled gently. "Of course not. Come in." Matteo stepped inside, his small sneakers barely making a sound on the polished floor. He sat on the cushioned chair by the window, hugging the book against his chest like a shield. "I haven't been able to sleep since that night," he murmured, staring at the edge of the table. "I keep thinking, if I fall asleep, they'll come back. They'll take me again." Elena sat beside him, saying nothing yet. She looked at the boy and saw not a child of wealth, but a child carrying fear too big for his years, a boy trying to survive in a world far beyond his control. "You know," she began softly, "when I was about your age, I got lost once in a shopping mall. Just for a few minutes, but I thought I'd never see my mother again." Matteo turned toward her. "Did she find you?" Yes, Elena said with a faint smile. But she didn't find me on her own. A store clerk pulled me behind the counter, gave me water, and called security. Because of her, my mother found me. I still remember her eyes, steady, safe. Matteo was silent for a long moment. I think your eyes looked like that too, that night. Elena didn't answer. Her throat tightened. The boy sitting before her, the son of a man everyone feared, didn't need bodyguards or doctors. What he needed was comfort from someone with nothing but a little courage and a heart that still ached for the broken. Do you hate it here? Matteo asked, eyes drifting toward the window but searching for her answer. I don't know yet, Elena said honestly. It's not like anywhere I've lived. It's beautiful, yes, she continued after a pause, but it's cold. Matteo nodded slowly. I grew up here, but it's never felt like home. There's no smell of baked bread, no music from the neighbor's room. No one asks how school was, except my dad. But he's always busy. Elena turned to him. Do you have a mother? Matteo's face stilled. She died when I was 5. Dad never talks about her. I only have one photo left. It's smudged because I dropped it in the sink once. Elena reached out, gently touching his small, cold hand. Then tell me about her, she whispered. If you want to. Or tell me about anything you like. Matteo looked up at her, and in that gaze, she saw something melt, a thin layer of ice breaking like frosted glass touched by sunlight. How long will you stay? He asked. Elena smiled, though she didn't know herself. As long as you need me. The boy nodded, not because the words promised certainty, but because for the first time in his life, someone had promised not to disappear. The next morning, Elena woke to the sharp ring of the clock striking 7. Sunlight poured through the window, filling the room with a brightness that made everything feel even more foreign, as if she were still trapped inside a dream she hadn't yet escaped. She dressed quickly, tied her hair back, and made her way down the wooden staircase toward the dining room. Though several days had passed since that night in Lincoln Park, the feeling of being watched had never left her. And this morning, it was stronger than ever. When she entered the dining room, the low murmur of conversation came to an abrupt halt. The long table, draped in a white cloth, gleamed with silver dishes and a vase of white orchids standing perfectly upright. At the far end sat 3 women, the administrative assistant, a brown-haired woman Elena hadn't met, and an older maid. All 3 turned their heads toward her, eyes unreadable. Elena gave a polite nod. None of them replied. Mrs. Porter remained composed, pulling out a chair for her as if nothing were amiss, then stepped quietly aside. Elena sat down and poured herself some coffee from a polished silver pot. Liam was nowhere to be seen, likely still asleep. Matteo was absent too. She took a few bites of eggs and bread, pretending not to hear the soft whispers across the table. But words still floated through the air, sharp and needling. She's just an outsider. And somehow staying on the 2nd floor near the young master's wing. They say she worked at a market once. Doesn't look like someone with much education. Elena bit her lip, her hand tightening around the silver fork. She knew those looks. She'd seen them back in her old neighborhood when housewives whispered about the single woman at the end of the block. She'd seen them in the supermarket when customers eyed her uniform and the frayed seams on her sleeves. But here, in a world wrapped in velvet and power, the contempt came gilded, disguised as civility. After breakfast, as Elena left the table to find Matteo, the brown-haired woman approached her in the hallway. She smiled faintly, though her eyes stayed cold. Miss Carter, isn't it? I'm Veronica Hale. I used to oversee everything concerning young Matteo until someone else came along. Elena nodded, keeping her tone calm. Nice to meet you. I'm sure you understand, Veronica went on smoothly, each word carefully measured, that this household operates on a certain order. Everyone has a place. And when someone from outside suddenly steps in, it tends to unsettle people. Elena steadied her voice. I don't want to step into anyone's place. I just did what I thought was right. Veronica's lips curved in a faint, almost pitying smile. People who believe they're right often don't realize when they're being used. Then she walked away, leaving Elena standing there with an emptiness spreading quietly through her chest. The rest of the day, Elena tried not to think about those looks. She spent more time with Matteo, helping him with his lessons, playing a few rounds of chess, reading side by side. Dominic appeared briefly several times, exchanging a few quiet words with his son and nodding courteously at Elena. Yet every time he entered the room, she could feel the other's eyes on her, watching, judging, as if she were taking advantage of his trust. That evening, while Elena was folding clothes in her room, Mrs. Porter knocked and handed her a printed sheet. "The weekly schedule," she said. "You're to attend all main meals. Master Matteo is homeschooled, but you may supervise and assist when necessary. Otherwise, please refrain from entering the basement or Mr. Valente's private work area." Elena accepted the paper with a quiet thank you. Mrs. Porter turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Ms. Carter," she said, her tone softer but firm, "a word of advice, don't be too kind. In this house, kindness is often mistaken for weakness, and weakness doesn't last long here." The door closed softly, leaving Elena alone. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking out at the garden, where small lights along the paths had just flickered on. Night was falling, and the silence of the mansion swallowed every sound like a living creature. She knew she wasn't welcome here. But for Matteo, and for something inside her she couldn't yet name, she couldn't leave. Not yet. Not while that boy still looked at her as if she were the only solid thing left in his world. That weekend, the sky finally cleared after days of grey. Matteo pleaded to go out, just a short trip to the farmer's market on the city's north side. Elena hesitated, but Dominic agreed on one condition: the security team would accompany them, and the outing would remain strictly off the record. Mrs. Porter arranged the cars early, and by 10 a.m., the convoy slipped out of the mansion. No horns, no noise, yet unmistakably deliberate in its presence. Elena sat beside Matteo in the back seat. Liam was across from them, clutching a small backpack stuffed with his handheld console and a folded comic book. Matteo was unusually bright that morning, his eyes sparkling like a child seeing a fair for the first time. Elena's chest tightened. In the 2 weeks they had been there, each genuine smile from the boy felt like a fragile miracle, and she would do anything to keep it alive. The market sat beside a small park lined with maple trees blazing in shades of gold and red, painting an autumn scene too perfect to seem real. The cars parked in a quieter back lot. 2 plain-clothed guards spread out on either side, keeping a polite distance so as not to spook the boy. Matteo gripped Elena's hand, pulling her between the stalls, eyes wide at baskets of glossy red apples, bundles of dried lavender, and the buttery smell of pastries floating through the crisp air. Liam was happily choosing cookies from an elderly woman with a kind face and a voice soft as an old melody. Elena leaned down to inspect a jar of honey when something froze the breath in her lungs, a small movement in the crowd. A man standing at a distance, hands buried in his coat pockets, staring directly at Matteo. It wasn't a casual glance. It was sharp, fixed, unblinking. Elena straightened, searching for the nearest guard, but he had just turned the corner past another stall. When she looked back, the man was gone. And then came the crash, metal on metal, loud enough to split the air. Elena spun around just in time to see a white truck barreling through the market entrance, smashing through tables as if no one were there. Screams erupted. Chaos. People ran. Tables overturned. Children cried. A burst of fire bloomed from the far end, no bomb, just a gas cylinder exploding at a food stand. "Matteo!" Elena shouted, but he was nowhere in sight. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she stumbled through the crowd. Then she saw him, a figure in a black hoodie dragging a child toward the alley exit, and the flash of gray sneakers she recognized from that morning. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She ran. Voices called behind her, but she didn't hear them. The man turned at her shout, startled, tightening his grip on Matteo. The boy kicked and swung, his small fists useless against the man's weight. Elena lunged, grabbed her handbag, and swung it like a weapon, striking the man across the head. He staggered, loosened his hold. Matteo slipped free and fell. Elena pulled him up, holding him tight just as the man started forward again, when 2 gunshots cracked through the air. He froze, then collapsed face first on the pavement, shards of glass crunching under his body. Dominic's guards were there, guns raised, faces grim. Another assailant went down seconds later. It had all happened in less than a minute. But to Elena, it felt endless. She knelt, wrapping her arms around Matteo as he trembled, sobbing into her shoulder. Her palms were bleeding where broken glass had cut through the skin, but she didn't care. When Dominic arrived less than 10 minutes later, stepping out of his SUV. He didn't speak at first. He only saw Elena, his son held tight in her arms, her face streaked with sweat and tears, as if his child's life rested entirely within her grasp. And for the first time, Dominic's eyes softened, losing their steel. "You saved him," he said quietly. Again. Elena didn't answer. She only nodded, breathless, tears mixing with the blood on her hands. In that moment of chaos beneath the autumn sun and the lingering smoke, every whisper, every suspicious glance from the days before dissolved into nothing. Because right there, amid the wreckage, Elena had done what no one else in that world of power and silence could promise to do. She had stood between life and death for a child who shared none of her blood but all of his trust that she would never let him go. Elena sat in the second-floor sitting room of the Valente mansion later that evening, her hands wrapped in white gauze, the cuts from the shattered glass at the market still throbbing faintly beneath the bandage. On the table before her sat a cup of chamomile tea Mrs. Porter had brought earlier, steam still curling softly into the air. From the hall came the steady rhythm of guards changing shifts, and now and then the sound of Liam's voice from the next room, excitedly telling Matteo a story about some daring adventure. Since the attack at the market, the house had changed. The whispers had stopped, the sidelong glances, the polite contempt, the hushed gossip, all gone. What replaced them was a silence edged with caution and something close to respect. Elena didn't care about any of that. All that mattered was that Matteo was safe. The boy still startled at sudden noises, still woke from nightmares, but he clung to her hand afterward and only calmed when she read to him in the dark, her voice the only steady thing left. A soft knock sounded. Elena turned. The door opened and Dominic entered. Today he wore a black shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. No bodyguards followed him, just the man himself, his gaze calm and deep as a lake before a storm. Elena rose, but he gestured for her to stay. "Are you getting any rest?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "Enough," she said. "He's doing better." Dominic nodded. "I know he won't leave your side, not even when he sleeps." He sat across from her, setting a cream-colored folder on the table. "I once believed I could protect him with guards, with guns, with iron gates," he said. But then a woman with nothing but her own hands and her eyes made him feel safer than all of that. Elena said nothing, unsure whether to accept the compliment or deflect it. Dominic opened the folder, flipping through the pages. "You know, I'm not a man who trusts easily, especially not someone who entered this world by accident. But with you, I've seen enough to know this isn't coincidence. You didn't just save my son. You did what I couldn't, made him laugh again, believe again, want to live." Elena drew a slow breath. "You want me to stay?" Dominic met her eyes. "I want you to become Matteo's legal guardian, not just his caretaker. Someone he can call family, in the eyes of the law and the heart alike." Her heart stilled. She looked at the folder, at the neatly arranged papers and the weight of what they meant. "You can't. You're his father." "I am," Dominic said. "And I'll always be. But I'm also a man with enemies, people who won't stop after one failure. I need someone he can hold on to no matter what happens to me." Elena lowered her head, fingers clutching the edge of her sweater. "I'm just an ordinary woman, Dominic. I don't have money or power, and I'm not even sure I know how to be a mother." He stood, stepping closer, resting one hand lightly on the back of her chair. "That's exactly why I trust you. People who know they're not perfect are the ones who try the hardest. Matteo doesn't need perfection. He needs someone who stays." The room went still. Elena could hear her own heartbeat. For the first time in years, after all the scraping by, all the small, weary battles of survival, someone had handed her something immense. A family not born of blood. A responsibility not demanded but offered freely, heavy as a promise to life itself. "I need time," she whispered. Dominic nodded. "Take it. But remember this, Elena, you're not an outsider in this house anymore." When he left, the door closing softly behind him, the folder remained on the table. Elena's hands trembled as she looked at the first page peeking from beneath the cover. Petition for legal guardianship. Matteo Valente. She had never imagined her life would cross into a world like this. But perhaps as the clock ticked in the stillness, fate had brought her here for a reason, and it was finally time to stop running. It began with whispers again, soft, carefully measured, and poisonous. By the third week after the market attack, the Valente mansion had settled into an uneasy calm. Security doubled, routes changed daily, and every door now bore a silent code lock. Dominic had returned to his office downtown, leaving behind a sense of tension that pressed against the walls. Elena filled her days caring for Matteo and helping Liam adjust to the strange rhythm of life inside luxury. But beneath the surface calm, something dark was moving. It started small, a misplaced keycard, a message not delivered, a glance that lingered too long. Mrs. Porter's eyes grew watchful again. Veronica Hale, always polite, began avoiding direct contact. And Cassandra Moretti had returned. Elena first met her 2 days after the market attack, a tall woman with sleek chestnut hair, lips painted like wine, and a calmness so precise it felt unnatural. She was introduced as Dominic's longtime associate, overseeing logistics and family security. But Elena could sense the weight behind that title. From the first moment, Cassandra's smile never reached her eyes. She would enter rooms like smoke, quiet, graceful, but leaving behind an unsettling trace. Her perfume, faint and metallic, lingered long after she left. One afternoon, Elena and Liam were helping Matteo arrange books in the upstairs library when she heard voices from the corridor. The door was ajar. She moved instinctively closer. "Dominic's getting soft," a woman's voice murmured. "Cassandra's. You can see it in the way he looks at her." A man replied, Vincent DeLuca, Dominic's right hand. His tone was cautious. "Be careful what you say, Cassandra." "I've been careful for years," she said, a cold laugh in her throat. "But since she arrived, he's been distracted. You saw what happened at the market. She shouldn't have been there in the first place. That was supposed to flush out Antonio's men, not risk the boy." "Dominic doesn't take orders from you," Vincent warned. "Doesn't he?" Cassandra whispered, her voice soft but laced with venom. "I'm the one who kept this family from collapsing after Sophia died. And now, he's replacing me with a woman who doesn't even know which fork to use at dinner." Elena froze. The name Sophia hung heavy in the air. Matteo's mother. Cassandra continued, her voice lowering. "You know what happens when a man like Dominic starts to care again? He makes mistakes. And mistakes in our world get people killed." Elena backed away, her pulse quickening. She didn't want to hear more. But then Cassandra said something that rooted her to the floor. "The shipment comes in Tuesday night. The moment it's confirmed, we move. Once Dominic is out of the way, I'll handle everything. Quietly. Efficiently. As it should have been." There was a pause, then Vincent's quiet reply. "You're playing with fire." "I built this fire," Cassandra hissed. "And I'll decide who burns." Footsteps echoed. Elena ducked behind the shelf, holding her breath until the sound faded down the hall. When she finally emerged, her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold the edge of the table. Liam noticed the color drain from her face. "What's wrong?" he whispered. Elena looked at him, her brother, growing into a young man far too quickly in a house built on secrets. "Nothing," she said softly, forcing a smile. "Go help Matteo find that atlas." But her mind was already racing. She had stumbled into something far bigger than she understood, something that could destroy everyone under this roof. That night, long after the house went quiet, Elena slipped out of her room. The marble floor was cold beneath her bare feet as she moved down the hallway toward the west wing where Dominic's office stood. Through the half-closed door, she saw light spilling into the corridor, a single desk lamp burning over stacks of documents. Dominic sat there, jacket off, tie loosened, his hands pressed to his temples. He looked tired. Not the unshakable man the city feared, but human, haunted, weighed down. Elena hesitated, then knocked softly. He looked up immediately, the steel returning to his gaze. "Elena, it's late." "I couldn't sleep," she said. "There's something I think you should know." He gestured for her to enter. "Go on." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I overheard Cassandra talking to Vincent. She mentioned a shipment coming Tuesday and said once it was confirmed, she'd handle everything. She also said you've become a liability." For a moment, Dominic said nothing. His face revealed nothing, no shock, no anger, only an unreadable calm. Then he stood, walked to the cabinet, and poured a glass of amber liquid. "You're sure of what you heard?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Cassandra's been with me for 15 years. She knows every account, every shipment, every shadow this house is built on. He looked up, eyes narrowing. If she's turned, then we're all sitting on a loaded gun. Elena took a step closer. You trust me enough to believe this? Dominic's gaze softened slightly. You've saved my son twice. Trust doesn't come any clearer than that. He handed her a small key from his pocket. This opens a safe in the study. Inside you'll find a folder labeled Orchid. Keep it with you. If anything happens before Tuesday, give it to Vincent, no one else. She hesitated, feeling the cold weight of the metal in her palm. What's in it? Insurance, he said quietly. For Matteo. As she turned to leave, Dominic spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Elena, if anything happens to me, take him and run. Don't come back. She looked back at him, his face caught half in the light, half in the dark, and understood that the man before her was preparing for war. The next day dawned deceptively calm. Cassandra was nowhere to be seen. Vincent kept close to Dominic, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Porter moved through the house with more stiffness than usual, sensing the current shifting beneath the marble floors. And that night, as Elena checked on Matteo before bed, she heard faint movement outside her window, the crunch of tires on gravel, the low hum of an engine, and voices carried on the cold wind. Something was coming. And she knew now, there was no safe place left within these walls.
Tuesday arrived with a stillness that felt wrong. Even the birds avoided the garden, as if the mansion itself had stopped breathing. From morning onward, Dominic moved like a man anticipating a storm. His phone never left his hand. His messages came in bursts of coded language Elena couldn't decipher. Vincent shadowed him constantly, quiet and watchful, eyes flicking to every door, every window. Elena could feel it too, the heaviness in the air, thick with expectation. She went through the motions of breakfast with Matteo and Liam, smiling when she could, hiding the fear that coiled tight in her chest. By sunset, the sky burned orange and violet over the Valente estate. The guards had changed positions twice already. 2 extra SUVs waited behind the gate, their engines idling in silence. Elena tucked Matteo into bed early that evening, pretending the world outside was calm. "Try to sleep, okay?" she said softly. He nodded, eyes half open, one hand clutching his stuffed bear. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" Her throat tightened. "Always." But the word carried a weight she couldn't promise. At 9:13 p.m., Dominic called a meeting in the West Wing, a logistics briefing, according to Mrs. Porter. Elena wasn't supposed to be there, but her instincts pulled her to the edge of the corridor, where the heavy doors were cracked just wide enough for her to hear. Cassandra's voice came first, steady, almost soothing. The container from Naples arrived early. I rerouted it to the East Dock. No paperwork trail, no customs interference. You can thank me later. Dominic's tone was colder than steel. I didn't authorize any rerouting. Cassandra gave a soft laugh. Dominic, you've been distracted. You're leaving gaps. Someone has to keep things running. Vincent's voice broke in sharply. You went over his head? I'm saving this operation, Cassandra said. While he's busy playing house with a cashier who thinks she's a saint, the silence that followed was absolute. Elena's blood went cold. Dominic's chair scraped back. When he spoke again, the words were low, deadly. Say that again. Cassandra didn't flinch. You heard me. You've lost your edge. You let an outsider into your home, your son's life, our business. You think Antonio Greco hasn't noticed? He's watching you unravel, and when he strikes, we'll all pay for your sentimentality. Dominic stepped forward. The sound of his shoes echoed on the marble. You think loyalty is measured in cold blood and profit? You think I built this empire by trusting snakes who bite the hand that feeds them? Cassandra's voice turned razor sharp. I think you built it with me, Dominic. And now you're letting it rot for her. The gunshot came out of nowhere. A single deafening crack. Elena flinched, covering her mouth. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came shouting, Vincent yelling Dominic's name, the thud of boots, another shot. Elena burst through the door. Smoke hung in the air. Vincent stood behind the desk, his gun drawn. Dominic was slumped against the corner cabinet, blood blooming through his white shirt. Cassandra stood near the door, her own weapon trembling in her hand. "Don't move," Vincent shouted, training his aim on her. Cassandra's eyes flicked toward Elena, her face twisting in fury. "You," she hissed. "This is all your fault. He would have stayed sharp if not for you." Before she could raise the gun again, Vincent fired. She staggered, dropped to her knees, and fell forward without a sound. Elena ran to Dominic. His breathing was ragged, shallow. "Stay with me," she said, pressing a towel from the desk against the wound. His hand found hers, gripping weakly. "Matteo," he rasped. "Get him out. Now. Vincent knows where to take you." Tears blurred her vision. "You're not dying here, do you understand?" Dominic's lips moved in something like a smile. "I've been dying since the day I buried Sophia." His eyes fluttered. "Go. Please." Vincent was already on the radio, barking orders. "All units, secure the east gate. We've got hostiles inbound. Greco's men are moving now." Elena's breath caught. "They're coming here?" Vincent nodded grimly. Cassandra sold him out. They knew the shipment would bring Dominic out in person. He looked at her. "Take the boy and your brother through the cellar. Follow the gravel path until you reach the stables. There's a service car waiting. Don't stop for anyone." "But what about—" "Go." The gunfire started before she reached the end of the hallway. Shouts, boots pounding, glass shattering. Chaos spilling through the mansion like fire. Elena sprinted down the stairs, heart hammering. She burst into Matteo's room, scooping the half-asleep boy into her arms. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "But we have to go. Now." Liam appeared in the doorway, pale but composed. "I heard the shots." She grabbed his hand. "Stay close. Whatever happens, don't let go." They ran through the narrow back corridors as smoke filled the air. Somewhere above them, another explosion rattled the ceiling. The cellar door was half hidden behind the pantry. Elena shoved it open, nearly tripping on the stone steps. The air was cold and damp, smelling of iron and earth. Behind them, faint echoes of shouting grew louder, men's voices, unfamiliar. Liam pulled the flashlight from his pocket. "This way," he said, his voice trembling but determined. They reached the far end, where the tunnel split into two passages. One led to the outer gardens, the other, if she remembered correctly from Mrs. Porter's map, toward the old vineyard road. "Which way?" Liam asked. Before Elena could answer, a figure stepped out from the darkness ahead. Vincent. He was bleeding from a cut above his brow, gun in one hand, a black bag slung over his shoulder. "This way," he said curtly. "Cars ready." He led them through the narrow passage until the tunnel opened into the night air. The distant hum of engines echoed from the other side of the estate. Flames flickered faintly from the mansion's upper windows. Elena turned once, staring back through the darkness, the silhouette of the house glowing behind the trees. "Is he?" Vincent shook his head once. "He told me to get you out." Tears welled up, but she swallowed them down. There would be time for grief later, if they survived. They reached the black sedan waiting by the stables. Vincent threw open the back door. "Get in." Matteo clung to Elena's waist, whispering, "Where's Dad?" Elena's voice broke. "He's right behind us, sweetheart." Vincent climbed into the driver's seat and slammed the door. The engine roared to life. "Hold on," he said. "We're not out of this yet." As they sped down the gravel road, the distant sound of sirens rose behind them, mingling with the fading roar of gunfire. Elena turned toward the rear window, watching as the Valente mansion, once a symbol of power and safety, burned against the night sky. And in that moment, with the boy asleep against her shoulder and her brother gripping her hand, she realized she had crossed a line that could never be undone. Dominic Valente had given her his trust, his world, and maybe his life. And now, all that was left to do was survive long enough to honor it. The road stretched endlessly into darkness. Vincent drove without headlights for miles, guided only by memory and instinct. The forest swallowed the car whole, each passing minute widening the distance between them and the flames that once marked their home. Elena sat in the back seat, Matteo asleep against her shoulder, his small hands still clutching her sleeve even in dreams. Liam stared out the window, silent, the faint light of the moon catching the fear in his eyes. It wasn't until the first hint of dawn appeared, a soft gray bleeding into the horizon, that Vincent finally pulled off the main road, turning down a narrow lane that led to an abandoned rest stop. The sign above the cracked pavement still read, Hillcrest Diner in faded red paint. He killed the engine. For a while, no one spoke. The only sounds were the ticking of the cooling motor and the distant echo of birds waking to a new day. Elena's voice broke the silence. "He's gone, isn't he?" Vincent didn't answer immediately. He reached into the glove compartment, pulled out a small envelope, and handed it to her. "Dominic gave me this months ago," he said. "Said if anything ever happened to him, it was to go to you." Elena stared at it, a plain white envelope, her name written in black ink in Dominic's sharp, deliberate handwriting. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside were two items, a folded note and a small silver key. She opened the note first. The handwriting was steady, unmistakable. "Elena, if you're reading this, then I've failed to keep my promise, to protect the people who didn't ask to be part of my war. You once told me courage isn't about fighting. It's about staying when everything inside you says to run. That's what you've done for Matteo. That's what you've done for me." The key opens a locker in Union Station, downtown Chicago. Inside, you'll find a file marked Orchid. What's in there will explain why this happened and how to keep Matteo safe. Don't trust anyone but Vincent.
D.
Elena folded the letter slowly, pressing it against her chest as tears gathered in her eyes. Vincent's voice softened. "We can't go to the police. Cassandra's death will trigger investigations. Greco's men will be watching every exit from the city. Then we leave Chicago," Elena said quietly. Vincent nodded. "There's a safe house upstate. I'll take you there. After that, you decide your next move." He started the engine again. By the time the sun fully rose, they were miles from the city, heading north, past cornfields and winding roads, where fog hung low like the breath of ghosts. The safe house was nothing like the Valente mansion, a single-story cabin, half hidden by tall pines and surrounded by silence. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth. It wasn't luxury. It was refuge. Matteo adjusted quickly, though the grief lingered in his eyes. At night, he'd wake up crying softly for his father, and Elena would hold him until he fell back asleep. Liam tried to stay strong, taking on small tasks, fixing leaks, chopping firewood, checking the old radio for news. But the nights were long. Too long. One evening, while Vincent stood watch outside, Elena finally decided to open the Orchid file. She laid the contents on the kitchen table under the flickering yellow light. Dozens of papers, handwritten notes, transaction records, and photos spilled out. At the top was a photo of Dominic, years younger, standing beside a smiling woman with auburn hair. Her eyes, kind, knowing, familiar, belonged to Sofia Valente, Matteo's mother. Behind the photo was another, this one less warm. Cassandra Moretti beside a man Elena didn't recognize. The caption beneath the photograph read, "Antonio Greco, Naples, 2014. Her stomach twisted. Cassandra had known Dominic's rival long before the war between them began. The next document was a letter, unsigned but typed. Project Orchid, Phase 3. Objective, transfer of data via encrypted offshore accounts. Beneficiary, A. Greco Holdings. Handler, C. Moretti. Collateral assets, 2. Elena read the last line again. Collateral assets, 2. She turned the page and found an attached note written by Dominic's hand. Cassandra used the logistics division to funnel payments through legitimate charities, including Sophia's orphanage project. When Sophia found out, she threatened to expose her. 3 weeks later, Sophia's car malfunctioned. Elena's breath caught. The meaning slammed into her like ice water. Sophia hadn't died in an accident. She had been murdered, and Cassandra had arranged it to keep Greco's operation hidden. Dominic had carried that truth in silence for years. She flipped through the rest of the documents, lists of accounts, coded ledgers, even photographs of offshore transfers. Evidence that could destroy not just Greco's empire, but half the network that funded him. Vincent came in quietly, saw the papers, and his expression hardened. Now you understand why Dominic trusted you. This isn't just insurance, it's the key to ending everything. Elena looked up at him. If we use this, Greco will come for us. Vincent nodded grimly. He already will. The question is when. Elena gathered the documents into a neat pile. Then we don't wait for him to find us. Liam looked at her from across the room. What are you going to do? She met his gaze, her eyes steady despite the fear clawing at her ribs. Finish what Dominic started. For a moment, silence filled the room. Thick, heavy, certain. Outside, wind moved through the pines like whispers of the past. Elena turned off the lamp and stared into the dark. Somewhere deep inside, she knew there was no turning back. The woman who once worked behind a grocery counter had become something else entirely. A guardian, a witness, a survivor carrying the weight of a dead man's promise and the future of his son. 3 days passed before the world found out that Dominic Valente was dead. News reports spoke of an explosion at a private estate outside Chicago, possible ties to organized crime, and an unidentified woman suspected of being at the scene. The police never named Elena, but her face lingered in the grainy photographs of an unknown witness. By then, she, Liam, Mateo, and Vincent were deep in the countryside. The forest around the safe house had grown colder, the wind sharper, carrying winter's scent. Inside, Elena studied the orchid documents late into the night, her fingers smudged with ink, her eyes burning from exhaustion. Every page deepened the web. Every number led to another account, another false charity, another dirty hand. The operation wasn't local, it was global. A hidden empire masked by philanthropy and faith-based projects, feeding billions into Greco's network. The realization hit her like a blow. Dominic hadn't just been protecting his family. He'd been standing at the edge of a system so big it swallowed countries whole. And now, the only proof of its existence sat in her hands. Vincent stood behind her one evening, watching as she arranged the papers. "You're doing exactly what he would have done," he said quietly. Elena looked up. "No, Vincent. I'm doing what he couldn't." She reached for the small silver key Dominic had left. "Union Station," she murmured. "He said the rest of it would make sense once I open the locker." Vincent frowned. "That's too risky. The station's crawling with agents, both sides watching for movement. You step in there and we'll never make it out if Greco's men spot you." Elena shook her head. "I can't stay hidden forever. Dominic didn't die, so we could spend the rest of our lives running. He left something there for a reason." Vincent's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. "Then we go together." Liam insisted on coming too. "I'm not letting you go alone," he said, his voice cracking with the courage of youth. By the following dawn, they were on the road. The drive south was quiet. The world around them seemed too normal. Families in minivans, joggers on sidewalks, commuters with coffee cups. It was almost surreal how ordinary life carried on while theirs had become a fugitive heartbeat in the dark. When they reached Union Station, Vincent parked 2 blocks away. "Move fast, stay unseen," he warned. "We go in, we split up, and we meet back here in 10 minutes. If anything feels wrong, you run." Elena slipped the silver key from her pocket, gripping it tightly as they entered through the side entrance. The vast marble hall loomed above her, sunlight spilling through the high glass roof. She walked past travelers, her heart pounding, until she reached the lockers near the north wing. Row after row of gray steel doors lined the wall, each marked with faded numbers. Her fingers found it locker 218. The key turned smoothly. The door creaked open. Inside was a small black case. No label, no markings. Just weight. Elena lifted it carefully, closing the locker behind her. She turned and froze. A man in a gray coat stood near the pillar, pretending to read a newspaper, but not turning the page. Another leaned against a vending machine, eyes tracking her reflection in the glass. Her pulse surged.
Greco's men.
Vincent appeared from nowhere, grabbed her arm. Run. They bolted through the hall, weaving through commuters. Shouts rose behind them. The echo of boots thundered across the marble floor. Liam's outside. Vincent shouted. They burst through the east exit, sprinting toward the car. Liam was already in the passenger seat, Matteo in the back. The moment they dove in, Vincent hit the gas. Bullets cracked against the pavement as the car screeched out into traffic. Open it. Vincent yelled over the noise. Elena fumbled with the latch on the black case. Inside was a small encrypted drive, a folded piece of paper, and a single photograph. She opened the paper first. In Dominic's handwriting. If you're reading this, then the truth is close. What's on this drive can end Greco. It's a list of every account, every politician, every official tied to him, and me. But power doesn't die easily. Once it's exposed, they'll come for you. Protect Matteo, and if you can't, finish what I couldn't. There's a name who can help you. Special Agent Reed Monroe, FBI Cyber Division, Washington.
He's clean.
Show him the drive and say the word Sophia.
He'll know.
Whatever happens next, know this. I was wrong to think redemption was beyond me. You showed me I still had a soul. Elena pressed the note to her lips, tears spilling silently. Vincent swerved sharply, dodging another car. You good back there? She nodded, voice breaking. Yes. By the time they reached the outskirts of the city, they'd lost the tail. The car finally slowed on a narrow highway cutting through endless fields. Liam turned to her, breathing hard. So, what now? Elena looked out the window. The horizon wide, the sky gray, with the promise of rain. We go to Washington, she said. We find Agent Monroe. We end this. Vincent nodded, jaw set. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got. She reached over, gripping his hand briefly. Thank you. For what? He asked. For not walking away. The next 2 days blurred together. They drove at night, slept in motels under false names, moved every few hours. Elena could feel the net tightening behind them. Greco's men were hunting, and time was running out. But under the exhaustion and fear, something stronger had taken root. Purpose. She wasn't just running anymore. She was moving toward something. Toward truth. Toward justice. Toward the chance to keep Dominic's son free of the darkness that had destroyed his father. On the third night, as rain streaked across the windshield and thunder rolled over the horizon, Elena turned to Vincent. When this is over, she said, her voice steady, I'm taking Matteo far away. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere he can just be a kid again. Vincent smiled faintly. That's what Dominic wanted too. Elena looked down at the small black case on her lap, the weight of it both burden and salvation. I know, she whispered, and I won't fail him. Rain fell steady over Washington, the kind of cold, endless drizzle that soaked through even the thickest coat. It was almost midnight when Vincent pulled the car into an underground parking garage beneath a shuttered office complex. The building looked empty from the outside, its windows dark, its walls cracked with age. But according to the address Dominic had left, this was where they'd find Special Agent Reed Monroe. Elena glanced at the small boy asleep in the back seat, his head resting against Liam's shoulder. Matteo had barely spoken since they left Chicago, but sometimes at night he whispered for his father, as if he still believed Dominic would walk through the door. Stay in the car, Vincent told Liam quietly. Keep the doors locked. Elena nodded. We won't be long. They stepped out into the cold, the rain tapping against the concrete like 1,000 tiny clocks. Vincent led her through a service entrance marked authorized personnel only. Inside, the air was stale. The hallways stretched long and dim, lined with flickering fluorescent lights. At the far end, a single office door glowed faintly from within. Vincent knocked twice. A voice from inside said, Come in. The man who stood behind the desk didn't look like any federal agent Elena had imagined. He wore a simple gray sweater, no tie, his beard flecked with silver. His eyes, though, were sharp, clear blue, and watchful. You must be Elena Carter, he said, gesturing for them to sit. And you must be Vincent DeLuca. Dominic told me if you ever showed up, it would mean he's dead. Elena nodded. He left me this. She placed the black case on the desk. He said to show it to you and say the word Sophia. At that name, something in Reed's expression shifted, a flicker of pain or maybe guilt. He opened the case, plugged the encrypted drive into his computer, and began to type. The room filled with the soft hum of processing data. Lines of code flashed on the screen. Then came images, bank statements, offshore accounts, encrypted emails. Reed exhaled. So, he finally did it. Did what? Elena asked. Reed looked up. You think Dominic was just a mafia boss? He leaned back, eyes narrowing. He wasn't just fighting Greco. He was working for us. Elena froze. What? 5 years ago, Reed continued, the Bureau struck a covert deal with Dominic Valente. He'd supply intelligence on Greco's operations, help us trace the global money pipeline. In return, we'd grant immunity for his past crimes, wipe his record clean so he could raise Matteo free of the life that built him. Elena's mouth went dry. You're saying he was an informant? More than that, Reed said. He was our inside man. Project Orchid was the code name for that deal, an operation designed to take down Greco's network from the inside. Vincent leaned forward, disbelief written across his face. You're telling me all this time we were risking our lives for the FBI? Reed's expression darkened. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Cassandra found out. She was part of the Bureau too, our embedded handler for Greco's side. She flipped when Dominic refused to hand over the final data. Elena's pulse quickened. So, she killed Sophia to keep him silent. Reed nodded slowly. Sophia uncovered Cassandra's dual allegiance. She planned to go public with the information. Dominic begged her not to, thinking he could fix it from within. 3 weeks later, Sophia's car exploded on the highway. Elena sat back, the breath leaving her lungs. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. He told me once, she whispered, that love was the one thing he couldn't control. I thought he meant power or weakness, but he was talking about her. Reed minimized the file and turned the screen toward her. Dominic sent me one final encrypted message before he died. It was locked until someone used your name as the access code. He clicked a key. A video file opened. Dominic's face filled the screen. Bruised, tired, but alive. He looked directly at the camera. If you're watching this, Elena, then I'm gone. I told you once that you made me believe in redemption. That wasn't a lie. I worked with the Bureau to end this, but I knew they'd never protect you. Not when the truth costs more than silence. Greco's empire runs deeper than the streets. It's in the banks, the charities, the campaigns. I thought I could cut out the rot without losing myself. I was wrong. Sophia died for trying to save me from it. The only way this ends is if you make it public. Not to the FBI, not to the courts, to everyone. Upload the data. Let the world see what we were. You once told me courage means staying. Don't stay for me. Stay for him. The screen went black. Elena sat in silence, tears rolling down her face. She didn't notice Vincent's hand resting gently on her shoulder, grounding her back in reality. Reed cleared his throat. We can protect you. Witness relocation. New names, new lives. But if you release this file, every name in it, politicians, corporations, law enforcement, will fall. You'll expose the rot, but you'll paint a target on your back forever. Elena looked up, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. Then, I guess we find a way to survive with a target. Vincent gave a faint grin. She's more stubborn than Dominic ever was. Reed slid her a flash drive. This will decrypt the rest of the data. Once you go public, I can't help you. You'll be on your own. Elena stood, wiping her tears. We've been on our own for a long time. As they left the building, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet asphalt and new beginnings. Matteo was still asleep in the car, his small face peaceful. Elena leaned down, brushing his hair gently from his forehead. Your father kept his promise, she whispered. Now it's my turn. Vincent looked at her through the open window. So, what's next? She turned toward the fading skyline, the flash drive gleaming in her hand. We finish it. Tonight. That night, from a nondescript motel outside the city, Elena sat before an old laptop, Vincent pacing behind her as she uploaded the Orchid files to a secure public network. Each percentage tick felt like a heartbeat. 93%, 96%, 99%. The final beep echoed in the quiet room. The world would wake up tomorrow to names and accounts that had hidden behind governments and charity logos for decades. Elena closed the laptop, exhaling shakily. "It's done," she whispered. Vincent sank into the chair opposite her, watching the exhaustion in her face soften into something like peace. "He'd be proud of you." Elena shook her head.
No.
"He'd tell me to run faster." They both laughed, quiet, fragile laughter born from too much pain. Outside, the rain started again, washing the city clean. By morning, the world was on fire. Every major news outlet carried the same breaking headline. Orchid files leak. Global crime syndicate expose. Politicians resigned. Corporations denied involvement. Bankers fled the country. But denial couldn't stop the flood. The documents Elena had released were irrefutable. Hundreds of pages of bank transactions, coded communications, and names that reached from Chicago's underworld to the marble halls of Washington. Dominic Valente's name was among them, but so was Antonio Greco's, and 50 more who had built empires on blood. Elena watched the coverage from the motel room, the flickering blue light of the TV painting her tired face. Matteo sat on the bed, hugging his knees. Liam stood by the window, watching cars pass on the highway. Vincent leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They'll come," he said quietly. "I know," Elena replied. By noon, they were gone, bags packed, car loaded, new route planned. But deep inside, she knew Greco wouldn't go down quietly. He didn't. That night, the storm came. They had stopped at a gas station 2 towns north, near the border of Pennsylvania. Elena went inside with Matteo to buy supplies. The clerk, an old man with kind eyes, smiled as she handed over cash. "You on the road long?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Feels like forever." As she stepped outside, the rain had started again, soft, almost gentle. Then she saw it, a black SUV pulling into the lot, headlights off. Her blood turned cold. "Vincent," she shouted. He was already moving. "Get down." Gunfire shattered the stillness. Glass exploded from the storefront. People screamed. Vincent returned fire, covering them as Elena pulled Matteo behind the gas pumps. Liam ducked low, shouting something she couldn't hear over the chaos. 2 men advanced from the SUV, faces hidden under rain-soaked hoods. Elena looked around desperately. No cover, no escape. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned the thunder. Then, a sound she hadn't heard in months, the deep roar of another engine. A second car appeared from the road, sleek and black, cutting through the rain like a blade. It skidded to a halt between the SUVs. The door opened. For a second, Elena thought she was dreaming. Dominic Valente stepped out.
Alive.
He was thinner, his face scarred, eyes darker than she remembered, but alive. He fired twice. The 2 attackers dropped instantly. The rest of Greco's men scrambled for cover. Vincent froze, disbelief written across his face. "Boss." Dominic gave him a faint, grim smile. "Takes more than a fire to kill me." Elena couldn't move.
Couldn't speak.
Her knees nearly gave way as he crossed the distance between them. "How?" she whispered. "Monroe staged it," he said, reloading his gun with calm precision. "The Bureau needed me dead, so I could finish this from the shadows." Gunfire echoed again. Dominic pushed her down, taking cover beside her. "Greco's coming himself," he said. "He wants the file destroyed and you." Elena met his eyes. "Then we end it tonight." Vincent joined them, reloading his weapon. Liam crouched behind the truck, shielding Matteo. The storm grew heavier, sheets of rain turning the night into chaos. From the road, another vehicle approached Greco's car. The man stepped out, gray suit drenched, his smile cold as steel. Dominic, he called. You never learn when to die, do you? Dominic stood slowly, gun steady. You should have stayed buried. Greco's men moved first. The firefight tore through the gas station, bullets sparking off metal, glass raining down like ice. Elena grabbed Matteo, pulling him behind the counter. Vincent went down with a cry, clutching his side. Dominic turned, rage flashing through him. Vincent, I'm fine, Vincent grunted. Finish it. Greco fired again, hitting a gas pump. Flames roared to life. The station lit up in an inferno of orange and smoke. Dominic and Greco faced each other through the rising heat, two men bound by decades of loyalty and betrayal. You ruined everything, Greco shouted. You think one woman and a leak will wash the blood off your hands. Dominic's voice was calm.
No.
But it's a start. He fired. The bullet struck true. Greco staggered, eyes wide, then fell backward into the flames. The explosion came seconds later. Elena covered Matteo, shielding him as debris rained down. The world turned white, then black, then silent. When the ringing in her ears finally faded, she looked up. The fire was dying. Rain hissed against the smoking ruins. Vincent was alive, barely. Liam was helping him up. Dominic stood a few feet away, his shirt soaked in blood, but still breathing. He met her eyes. It's over. She ran to him, tears cutting clean paths down her soot-streaked face. You're bleeding. He smiled faintly. First time you saw me, I was worse. Don't talk like that, she whispered. We're going home. He touched her cheek, his fingers trembling. You already are. His knees gave out. She caught him, cradling his head in her lap as the rain poured harder. Dominic. He managed a weak smile. Take care of them. Matteo, Liam, they're good boys. Don't you dare leave now. But his eyes were already dimming, the fire in them fading into peace. Elena, he whispered, you saved me from myself. Then he was gone. The world fell silent again. No more gunfire, no more chaos, just rain and loss. Matteo crawled beside her, crying quietly, his small hand clutching Dominic's coat. Is he sleeping? Elena pulled the boy close, her tears finally breaking free. Yes, she whispered. He's just sleeping. By dawn, the authorities arrived. Monroe himself came in secret, escorted them away before the press could swarm. Greco's men were dead, his empire in ruins. The Orchid Files had burned his world to ash. 2 weeks later, in a quiet coastal town far from Chicago, Elena stood with Matteo and Liam on a small hill overlooking the sea. The sky was clear, the wind gentle. She placed a single white rose on the gravestone. It bore no name, only 3 words. He kept his promise. Liam stood beside her, hand in hers. Do you think he'd be proud of us? Elena looked at the horizon, the sun breaking through the clouds. He already was. Behind them, Vincent waited by the car. His side had healed. He had promised to stay until they were safe, then disappear quietly as he always did. Matteo ran down toward the water, laughter breaking through the sound of the waves. For the first time in months, it was a pure, unshadowed laugh. Elena smiled faintly, the ache in her chest softening. Dominic Valente had built a world on control, on fear. But in the end, it wasn't power that saved his legacy. It was the courage of one woman who refused to look away when everyone else did. That night, as the sun sank into the sea, Elena sat on the porch with Liam asleep beside her and Matteo curled up in her lap. She closed her eyes and whispered into the wind, "Rest now. We'll be okay." And somewhere, she liked to believe, Dominic heard her, smiling from whatever peace he had finally found.